Black CEO kicked out a VIP seat for a white passenger minutes later. He fired the entire crew. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Sir, I'm going to need you to vacate this seat. Now. The words cracked through the cabin like a slap. Not loud, just sharp enough to slice the air in the front row of the aircraft. A dozen heads turned at once, the way a flock reacts to sudden movement. Screens paused. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the engine's low hum felt like it dipped for a beat. Row 1A, the VIP seat, the one that came with champagne before takeoff, noise-canceling walls, and the kind of legroom that made business executives feel like royalty. Elias Grant looked up slowly. He wasn't slouched. He wasn't confrontational. He wasn't even fully settled in the seat yet. Just one hand resting on the armrest, the other adjusting the cuff of a charcoal gray jacket tailored so precisely it seemed poured onto him. But none of that mattered. Not to the flight attendant standing over him, chin tilted, jaw tight, eyes sharpened by a conviction she didn't earn. Sir, this seat is for our priority passenger. She emphasized priority like the word itself, carried bloodlines. Please step aside. You are in the wrong place. Before Elias could respond, a man approached from behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, white hair brushed back with the kind of arrogance that could land itself without a pilot. That's my seat, he said, waving his boarding pass like a flag of inherited superiority. Move him. Cameras rose like black silhouettes along the aisle, phones held up discreetly but eagerly, lenses widening to catch humiliation before it even happened. One woman whispered, "Oh no." Another, "I knew something was off when he walked in." A man muttered to his wife, "You'd think people would know how to read seat numbers." Row 1A. The seat Elias was assigned, printed clearly on his boarding pass. But truth had little weight here, not when bias was faster. The attendant took half a step closer, her tone sweetening in the way sugar becomes a weapon. "Sir," I'm asking nicely, "please remove yourself from this seat before we call airport security. Our VIP client shouldn't have to wait." Before he could speak, the white passenger sighed dramatically. "Look, sweetheart," he said to the attendant, "don't bother arguing with him. Just get him out. People like that always try to sneak up front." A ripple of discomfort moved through the cabin. A few eyes dropped, a few hardened, a few recorded even more intently. Elias exhaled slowly, a breath that didn't tremble, didn't rise, didn't betray anything except patience worn thin. He wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. He had seen this scene before, in lobbies, boardrooms, concierge desks, and car dealerships. But this moment had a different texture to it, a deliberate disrespect, rehearsed and familiar. The attendant leaned in again. "Sir, we don't want to escalate this. You need to cooperate." Elias lifted his gaze, meeting hers directly. No flare, no tremor, just a stillness so steady it made the space between them tighten like a drawn string. "I am in the correct seat," he said calmly. She didn't even look at his boarding pass. She waved a dismissive hand at it like it was counterfeit currency. "Well, verify that," she snapped. "In the meantime, stand up." The engines outside rumbled as if bracing for turbulence no one else sensed yet. Behind them, a teenager whispered, "Bruh, is he really getting kicked out of first class?" His friend responded, "Dude, it's not first class. That's the VIP row. They don't let just anyone sit there." Exactly. They didn't let just anyone sit there. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elias. The white passenger flashed a smug smile, a grin so self-assured it could anchor a yacht. "Finally, some order," he said. "I paid for this seat. I expect the airline to maintain its standards." Elias didn't move. Not because he refused, but because something in the air shifted. Something small, barely visible, but undeniable. A cold note entered the cabin. Not from the air conditioning, but from the collective realization that this man, the one being pushed, prodded, and spoken down to, was not reacting the way they expected. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't shrinking. He wasn't pleading. He simply observed. The attendant stiffened, sensing she was losing control of the script. "Sir, this is your last warning." Elias finally lifted his boarding pass, 2 fingers, effortless, composed. "Verify it," he said. The attendant snatched it, eyes flashing. She glanced down, stopped. Blink. Read again. Her throat tightened, visible, subtle, but real. Row 1A, his name. Clear. Undeniable. Before she could speak, her radio crackled. "Cabin crew, stand by. We have an urgent directive from operations." She froze. Elias lowered his hand. The smallest smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not cruelty, not triumph, just certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from a man who owns more than the seat he's sitting in. The cabin didn't know it yet, but the next 10 minutes would rewrite the power structure of everyone on that plane. And the flight crew was about to learn exactly who they had just tried to remove from row 1A. The radio crackled again, louder this time, tinged with something the passengers couldn't identify, but Elias could. Authority. Acceleration. A system suddenly waking up. The attendant stiffened, clutching the device like it might bite her. "Operations to Flight 207, the voice said. "Hold all positions. Repeat, hold all positions until further notice." The man who claimed the seat, the self-declared VIP, scoffed. "What the hell is this? Just move him. I have a conference in Denver. I don't have time for he didn't finish." Because the aircraft's forward door opened again, and a new figure stepped inside. A ground supervisor, yellow vest, clipboard tucked under his arm, face tight with urgency. He scanned the cabin, not for the white passenger, not for the flight attendant, but for him, for Elias. The supervisor's eyes locked onto him, and something like recognition flickered, not recognition of a face he knew, but recognition of rank. The kind of instinct people in operational roles acquire, knowing instantly who they should not cross. He walked straight toward row 1A. "Sir," he said, voice suddenly respectful in a way that made half the cabin blink, "we're reviewing an urgent status request." "Are you comfortable at the moment?" The attendant blinked. "Comfortable?" she repeated, incredulous. "Hez, sitting in the wrong." The supervisor lifted a hand, a gesture not of rudeness but of hierarchy. "Mom, I need you to stand by." Her cheeks flushed crimson. The white passenger leaned forward, indignant. "Do you people not understand? That's my seat. I'm the one who belongs here." The supervisor didn't even look at him. He kept his attention on Elias, measuring him. Steady, professional, cautious. "Sir," he said again, "would you like water while we sort this out?" The cabin bristled. The attendant's jaw fell open. The white passenger recoiled like someone had splashed ice water on his ego. Elias nodded once, a subtle tilt of the head. "No, thank you," he said quietly. "Proceed." Something in that tone, unforced, unhurried, unquestioning, made the supervisor straighten his vest. Understood. He stepped aside, whispered into his radio. Passengers exchanged glances, fragments of a story they didn't yet understand beginning to thread together. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "Why is the supervisor acting like he works for him?" Her husband swallowed. "Because maybe he does?" Phones remained raised, recording every twitch of tension. The attendant, now visibly shaken, tried to recover her position. "This is a misunderstanding," she said sharply. "His pass must be a misprint. No one gets row 1A without A." Second voice crackled through the radio. "Confirm passenger identity. Urgent." The supervisor turned to Elias once more. "Sir, may I verify your full name?" He already knew the answer. He knew before he asked. But the ritual mattered. The cabin leaned in. Elias reached into his jacket. Not rushed, not theatrical, just a measured motion, the way someone retrieves something they've used 1,000 times, in 1,000 rooms more important than this one. He handed over his ID. The supervisor looked down and froze. All color drained from his face. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the dawning realization that the storm brewing in this cabin wasn't interpersonal. It was structural. He swallowed, hard. Mr. Grant, he said, voice lowering instinctively to a respectful register, we weren't informed you'd be on this flight. The white passenger blinked. Grant? Who's Grant? I don't. But a man across the aisle did. He straightened in his seat, eyes widening. Wait, he whispered. Elias Grant? As in the board? The one who, before he could finish, the supervisor spoke again. Mr. Grant, Operations has requested immediate cooperation from all staff until the matter is resolved. Please sit tight for just a moment while we update the captain. Update the captain? The white passenger choked. Over a seat? But the supervisor had already turned away, moving briskly, calling someone with a tremor of urgency. Elias leaned back in his seat, not defiant, simply reclaiming the space that was his all along. The attendant stood stiff, eyes darting to the ID she had ignored minutes before. Her throat moved as she swallowed. The cabin watched as reality rearranged itself around one man. Above them, a soft chime, the sound of the cockpit calling the supervisor. He answered. Is this confirmed? The captain asked. Yes, sir, the supervisor said. It's him. 3 seconds of silence. Then the captain spoke again. Begin protocol, 2 words. Simple, precise, catastrophic, because the crew didn't know the meaning yet. But Elias did, and in that moment he knew exactly how the next few minutes would unfold. The supervisor hadn't taken 3 steps toward the front of the cabin before the mood shifted again, subtle at first, then unmistakable, like pressure building before a storm breaks open. The captain himself appeared. That never happened during boarding. Not unless something serious was unfolding. He emerged from the cockpit in a crisp uniform, hat tucked under one arm, posture straight as a steel beam. His eyes swept the cabin with the alertness of someone used to evaluating crises at 36,000 feet. But this wasn't turbulence. This wasn't safety protocol. This wasn't a passenger dispute. This was something the crew had no script for. The captain approached row 1A. Mr. Grant, he said quietly, with a restrained formality that made even the people who didn't recognize the name sit up straighter. The white passenger's mouth fell open. His jaw worked soundlessly, like his mind was flipping through every possible explanation and rejecting all of them. The attendant stepped aside, instinctively giving the captain space, though no one asked her to. The captain lowered his voice further. I apologize for the situation. We were not informed you'd be joining this flight. Had we known, crew placement and VIP handling would have been... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone near them could feel the shift. This wasn't customer service. This was hierarchy in motion. The captain continued. Operations is requesting real-time updates. The crew has been instructed to pause all remaining boarding procedures until further notice. The attendant blinked rapidly. Captain, with respect, I was just following seating protocol. The captain turned. One look, not sharp, not angry, just definitive. Her mouth closed. Elias let the silence stretch, then spoke calm, even, measured. I asked you to verify my boarding pass, he said to her. You refused. Her voice came out thin. Sir, I didn't refuse. I just... You dismissed it, Elias corrected gently, without raising his tone. There's a difference. The white passenger tried to recover his footing. Look, this is getting blown way out of proportion. He was in my seat. It's simple. The captain inhaled slowly, the kind of breath people take before addressing nonsense. Sir, he said to the man, row 1A was assigned to Mr. Grant. Your seat is 1C. 1C? The man repeated, voice cracking. That's not possible. I always get 1A. Always. Not today, the captain replied. A few passengers bit their lips to hide smiles. Others watched like they were witnessing a live correction of gravity. The captain then handed Elias' ID back with both hands, a gesture most passengers had never seen in aviation. Mr. Grant, Operations has requested confirmation. Would you prefer we replace the crew before departure? Or the attendant gasped. The white passenger stared as if hearing a foreign language. Elias held the ID lightly, tapping it once against his palm. No replacements yet, he said. Not until I hear their explanation. The attendant looked like her knees might buckle. Aye, sir, it was never personal. I was only trying to follow protocols don't require condescension, Elias replied. Nor assumptions. The cabin had gone so silent that the ticking overhead air vents sounded like tiny metronomes. The white passenger tried again, more desperate now. "Come on. You're really going to make this some power trip? I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," Elias said softly. "Respect shouldn't depend on recognition." A murmur rippled through the rows. The captain straightened. "Mr. Grant, I can escort the crew to the jet bridge if you'd like a private word." Elias shook his head. "No, they'll stay right here." The attendant pressed a hand to her chest as if to steady herself. The captain nodded. "Then I'll have operations hold departure until your directive." He stepped away, speaking rapidly into his headset, activating a chain of corporate responses most airlines only used during emergencies. Passengers whispered, "Why does he get to direct departures? Who even is he?" Grant, is he the investor?" "Bigger than that, I think. My brother works in aviation, that name is top level." The pieces clicked slowly, like tumblers in a lock. Elias didn't gloat. He didn't lean back with ego. He simply folded his hands, thumb brushing the edge of his boarding pass. The attendant swallowed, eyes lowered now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Not because he wanted to watch her squirm, but because silence, when wielded by the right person, could reshape an entire room. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "You have procedures," he said softly. "But respect is not one of them. That has nothing to do with training. That has to do with choice." The supervisor reappeared from the front, pale. "Mr. Grant, operations is asking how you want to proceed." The cabin held its breath again. Because everyone could feel it now, something far bigger than a seating dispute was about to unfold. And Elias Grant was done shrinking to make anyone else comfortable. Operations didn't wait long. The supervisor stood rigid near the curtain, separating first class from the rest of the plane, fingers clasped behind his back as if bracing for impact. His radio crackled again, this time with a clipped urgency. "Confirm status. Has Mr. Grant made his decision?" The words carried through the cabin like an electric pulse. All eyes swung toward Elias. He hadn't moved since the question was asked. He sat in row 1A with an unsettling stillness, not the stillness of anger, but the stillness of someone familiar with pressure, expectations, and the weight of systems that bend when he speaks. The white passenger beside the aisle shifted uncomfortably. "This is insane," he muttered. "Hez just a traveler. Nobody gets this kind of." A man 2 rows back interrupted. "Not nobody," he whispered. "Only the ones who sign paychecks for the people who fly the plane." The white passenger turned pale. The attendant, still visibly shaken, stood with her hands clasped, fingers trembling so subtly that the trembling looked like a confession. Elias finally looked up. His voice was quiet, but it landed across the cabin like a command. "Bring me the crew." The attendant inhaled sharply. The supervisor nodded once and gestured for the rest of the flight attendants to come forward. 3 of them emerged from the galley, 2 anxious, 1 already blinking back tears. They formed an uneasy line near row 1A. The captain approached, standing behind them like a silent witness. Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't point. He didn't accuse. Instead, he asked the simplest question in the world. "What made you think I didn't belong here?" The cabin shrank into itself. The attendants exchanged looks. The lead attendant, the one who had barked orders, waved him off, dismissed his boarding pass, tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, she forced the sentence out. "We were told a VIP would be in this seat," she whispered. "We assumed it wasn't you." "Why?" Elias asked. Her eyes flickered, fear, shame, calculation, searching for an answer that didn't exist. "Your appearance, sir," she said finally. "It didn't match what we expect from our priority list." Another attendant squeezed her eyes shut, as if the truth stung even her. Elias nodded slowly, not surprised, only disappointed that the answer came so easily. "And you," he said, turning slightly to the others. "Did any of you question her assumption?" No one spoke. No one even pretended. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of complicity, full of resignation. Full of the quiet acknowledgement that not one of them, not one, had thought to check the boarding pass of a black man in a premium seat. The captain exhaled sharply, not in disagreement, but in recognition. Elias reached into his jacket, not for his ID this time. not for his phone, but for a small black card with a silver emblem pressed into its surface, an insignia almost no one in the cabin recognized, but the captain did. His posture snapped straight. "Sir, is that?" "Yes," Elias said. "Board Authority Directive credentials." Passengers gasped. Even the ones who didn't understand the emblem felt its weight. In aviation, Board Authority Directive meant one thing: the power to initiate a full operational audit of the crew, the captain, the flight, and the airline immediately, without appeal. Elias tapped the card against his knee. "I am the primary shareholder of this airline," he said, each word landing with calm precision. "I oversee our safety audits, our personnel reviews, and our ethics investigations." He looked at the attendant, who'd humiliated him. "And today, I am observing a failure." The supervisor swallowed. "Sir, operations is standing by for your directive." Elias slid the card back into his jacket with deliberate grace. "Begin the audit." The attendant's breath hitched. One of her colleagues covered her mouth with her hand. The white passenger sank into his seat like someone had cut the strings holding him up. The captain nodded curtly. "I'll notify operations." He stepped toward the cockpit, voice low but urgent into his headset. "Start protocol. Cabin crew under formal review. Immediate suspension pending investigation." Gasps scattered across the rows. Someone whispered, "Hez about to ground them." Someone else murmured, "He has that authority?" A third voice, trembling, answered, "He is the authority." The lead attendant tried to steady her voice. "Sir, I never meant to." "You meant exactly what you did," Elias answered gently, "and that is the problem." Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the galley doorframe, eyes shining with panic. The supervisor turned toward Elias once more. "Mr. Grant, operations wants to know if you'd like to remove the crew now or keep them on board until landing." Elias closed his eyes briefly, not to think, but to restrain a deeper irritation. "Not yet," he said. "First, they will hear exactly what happens next." The cabin leaned forward. The attendants braced themselves. Elias opened his eyes, and the air in the aircraft tightened, quiet, heavy, expectant, because the next sentence would decide the fate of everyone standing in front of him, and he didn't need to raise his voice to deliver it. For a long, suspended moment, Elias didn't speak. He simply let the weight of the moment settle over the crew, not crushing them, not punishing them, but forcing them to sit with the truth they had created. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice was low, controlled, precise. "You will remain on this flight," he said. "All of you." The attendants looked up, startled as if mercy had taken a shape they couldn't recognize. "But," Elias continued, "you will not be operating it." A ripple of shock moved through the cabin. The captain paused mid-step. The supervisor stiffened. The white passenger clutched his armrest like the world had tilted. Elias turned slightly, eyes settling on the captain. "Prepare for a substitute crew." The captain nodded, jaw tight, already lifting his headset. "Understood. Captain," Elias added, "keep them on the manifest. They'll observe from the jump seats. The audit requires their presence." The attendants froze, not removed, but forced to witness. One of them whispered, barely audible, "Oh God." Elias folded his hands calmly. "Removal teaches nothing," he said. "Accountability teaches everything." Passengers murmured, unsettled and fascinated in equal measure. A businessman in row 2 leaned forward, whispering to his wife, "This is corporate-level discipline." "Hess, treating the cabin like a boardroom." His wife whispered back, "No, he's treating them like people who should have known better." The supervisor pressed a hand to his earpiece. "Operations confirms replacement crew is en route from Gate 41. Estimated arrival, 7 minutes." The cabin was motionless, thick with the kind of tension that made every breath feel louder. The lead attendant, her eyes watery but defiant, finally spoke. "Mr. Grant, I know what it looks like. I know what I did was wrong, but I made a mistake. Just a mistake." Elias held her gaze, not cruel, not vindictive. "A mistake," he repeated, "is tripping on the jet bridge. A mistake is misplacing a meal tray." He let the silence sharpen. "What you did was an assumption, a decision, a judgment." The attendant's lips trembled. He continued, You didn't check the boarding pass because you believed you already knew the truth. You didn't verify because you believed you didn't need to. You didn't question yourself because you believed you were right. He tilted his head slightly. And that belief is the most dangerous part. The supervisor lowered his head. Even he couldn't pretend neutrality now. Elias turned slightly toward the cabin, his voice projecting just enough for nearby rows to hear. I don't care about seat assignments. I care about patterns, because patterns tell stories. And the story you told today is one this airline cannot afford to repeat. The attendant swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. It won't happen again, she whispered. It already happened, Elias replied. Her breath hitched. So now, he said, we learn why. The second attendant, the younger one, voice shaking, stepped forward. It wasn't just her, sir. I thought the same thing. I didn't question her because I didn't think there was anything to question. And why didn't you? Elias asked. The young attendant's shoulders collapsed. Because people like you don't usually sit here. The confession punched through the cabin like a gust of cold air. Some passengers flinched. Some closed their eyes. Some bowed their heads, ashamed of a truth they recognized all too well. Elias nodded slowly. There it is. 2 words that cut deeper than anger ever could. The white passenger, desperate to soften his own involvement, sputtered, Look, everyone's stereotypes. It's human nature. Nobody means anything by it. Elias turned toward him not with fury, but with a calm so sharp it felt surgical. Intent is irrelevant, Elias said. Impact is not. The man shrank back. The supervisor's radio buzzed again. Replacement crew at the gate. Ready for clearance. The captain looked to Elias for direction. He nodded once. Bring them in. Within moments, the forward door opened again. A fresh set of attendants stepped inside, polished, alert, unaware of the earthquake they were walking into. They paused at the sight of the original crew, lined up like students awaiting judgment. The captain gestured them toward the galley. You'll take over this flight. The lead attendant's breath stuttered. Her eyelashes glistened. Sir, please, this is my career. Elias looked at her with an expression that was almost gentle. Your career, he said, isn't ending. She blinked. But it is being rewritten. Confusion flickered across her face, hope edging cautiously into despair. By the time we land, Elias continued, operations will have your suspension terms. You will undergo full retraining, all implicit bias modules, and a supervisor review before your next assignment. The attendants exhaled shakily, relief and humiliation braided into one. Elias' voice remained even. You keep your job, but you lose the illusion that you were doing it well. No one argued. No one dared. Because justice didn't need to shout. And as the new crew took their positions, the cabin braced for the next revelation, the one that would not only define the flight, but redefine the entire airline. The replacement crew stepped into the cabin with a professionalism that cut cleanly through the tension. Their posture, their uniforms, their clipped greetings, everything about them contrasted sharply with the rattled attendants still standing near row 1A, pale and trembling. Passengers shifted in their seats, some trying not to stare, others unable to look away. The captain returned to Elias' side. Mr. Grant, he said, voice low, operations has requested an additional note. They want confirmation on whether the audit extends to the gate staff as well. Elias didn't look surprised. It will, he replied. Anyone who touched this boarding process touched this outcome. The captain nodded, knowing exactly what that meant. Behind them, the lead attendant placed a hand over her mouth, tears threatening to break free. She wasn't crying for her job anymore, that part was safe. She was crying for the truth she couldn't unsee now that it had been revealed. The younger attendant beside her whispered, We didn't think. We didn't stop to think. A passenger in row 3 muttered, not unkindly, That's the problem. Another answered softly, That's how bias works. Quiet, automatic, undeniable. The cabin wasn't just watching a disciplinary action anymore. They were witnessing a mirror being held up to an industry. Elias finally rose from his seat. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't forceful, wasn't even loud. But the sound of him standing, the subtle shift of fabric, the soft exhale sent a ripple of attention across the first-class cabin. Every eye snapped toward him. He adjusted his cuffs, the gesture small but deliberate, a subtle reclaiming of dignity that had never been lost, only underestimated. He stepped toward the attendants. "You will sit," he said gently. "Not as crew, as observers." They nodded, silent. They didn't dare defy him now, but more importantly, they didn't want to. They moved to the jump seats at the front of the cabin, the ones usually reserved for takeoff and landing. Now, they felt like witness stands. The white passenger, who had been shrinking lower and lower, shifted in his seat. "I never wanted all this," he said, voice cracking. "If I'd known who you were, I would have." Elias turned slowly. "If you'd known who I was," he said, "you would have behaved differently." "That's exactly the issue." The man's shoulders slumped. Elias stepped closer. "You don't give respect to who you recognize. You give it to who is human." The man swallowed hard. I am sorry." "I'm sure you are," Elias replied calmly. "But your apology is a reaction. Your behavior was a choice." A few passengers bowed their heads as if the weight of that truth landed on them too. The supervisor approached again, out of breath. "Operations wants your final directive before departure," he said. "They've issued Code Amber. The entire command chain is on standby." Passengers murmured. Recognizing the term from news reports, Code Amber wasn't for emergencies in the sky. It was for emergencies in conduct. Elias brushed a crease from his jacket sleeve. "Good," he murmured. "They should be." The supervisor stood straighter. "What would you like us to relay, sir?" Elias looked toward the crew in the jump seats, the ones who had assumed, judged, dismissed, and acted as if the cabin belonged more to their comfort than to the passengers. And then he spoke, not harshly, but with a clarity that cut deeper than anger ever could. "Tell operations," he said, "that the audit will not be quiet." The supervisor blinked. "Sir?" Elias' gaze sharpened the first flash of steel the cabin had seen from him. "It will be public, transparent, documented. I want every department involved to see what happens when bias becomes procedure." The attendants paled. The white passenger clenched his jaw. Even the captain stiffened, because a quiet audit was internal. A public audit? That was systemic. That meant training reforms, policy rewrites, mandatory bias evaluations, promotion freezes, contract renegotiations. It meant the airline wouldn't be able to bury what happened here, not this time. The cabin felt the shift. This wasn't about one seat. This wasn't about one man. This was about culture and the cost of letting assumptions dictate who belonged. The supervisor finally exhaled and nodded. "I'll notify operations." He stepped away, radio already buzzing. Elias returned to row 1A and sat down again, but something about the seat felt different now. Not reclaimed, restored. A passenger across the aisle murmured to her husband, "He didn't embarrass them. He educated them." Her husband shook his head softly. "No," he whispered. "He didn't educate them. He exposed them." Above them, the cabin lights dimmed to pre-departure glow. The new crew prepared the cabin with crisp efficiency, and the old crew watched, silent, humbled, unable to forget the truth that had cracked open at 1A. Because this wasn't just the beginning of an audit. It was the beginning of consequences they had never imagined and would never forget. The replacement crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the cabin for departure. But despite their professionalism, the atmosphere felt nothing like a routine flight. Every movement seemed amplified, every whisper sharpened. Because everyone knew, this plane wasn't just taking off, it was testifying. The attendants in the jump seats sat straight, hands folded tightly, their uniforms suddenly feeling heavier. The humiliation wasn't in being replaced, it was in realizing they'd become the cautionary tale of their own industry. The cabin grew quiet as Elias rose again. He didn't pace. He didn't tower over anyone. He simply walked to the open space near the galley, as if choosing a stage the room didn't know it had. The captain returned from the cockpit, standing near him with a posture that mixed respect with tension. "Mr. Grant," he said softly, "Operations requests clarification. They want to know if this will remain an internal audit or if you intend to escalate to the Board of Ethics." Elias didn't look at him. He looked at the attendants. Then at the passengers watching. Finally, he spoke. "Escalate." The word hit the cabin like a pressure drop. The captain inhaled sharply. "Understood." The supervisor's radio lit up instantly. Conversations crackled, coded terms flying across networks. Words like compliance review, ethics resolution, and liability counsel rippled from unseen speakers. Even passengers unfamiliar with airline governance felt it. The air had become procedural thunder. The white passenger in 1C looked like he might sink into the floor. I understand what I did was wrong, he stammered. Really, I never meant for any of this. Elias turned toward him, his expression unreadable. What you meant, Elias said quietly, is irrelevant. What you believed was exposed. The man's lips trembled. So what now? What happens to us? Elias didn't answer him. Not yet. Instead, he addressed the cabin not in a speech, but in a measured unfolding of truth. There are 3 layers to any failure, he said. Action, culture, and consequence. He nodded toward the attendants. You acted on assumption. He gestured toward the supervisor. You supported it with silence. Then he turned slightly, gaze sweeping across the first few rows. And the culture allowed it. The room tightened. Not a single person moved. He continued, if I handle this privately, you learn nothing. If I handle this quietly, the airline changes nothing. He clasped his hands behind him. So I won't. The attendants' faces drained of color. The young attendant whispered, please, please don't ruin us. Elias' voice stayed steady, almost gentle. I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here to reveal you. She looked down in shame. He added, and what you do with that revelation will determine the rest of your career. The plane hummed softly beneath their feet, the sound of systems powering up, unaware of the human systems being dismantled above them. The captain cleared his throat. With your permission, sir, operations suggests delaying departure until the board receives your preliminary findings. Elias nodded. Give them 3 minutes. The captain moved to the cockpit. The supervisor followed with hurried steps, radio pressed to his ear. Now only the attendants, Elias, and the first-class passengers remained in the quiet. Elias turned back to the crew, the same crew that had dismissed his boarding pass, questioned his presence, corrected him with confidence, but not competence. You said earlier, he began, that people like me don't usually sit here. The words hung heavy. The young attendant's eyes filled. She shook her head as if wishing she could reverse the past 10 minutes. That's the lie you believed, Elias said, and the lie the world taught you. He stepped closer, not threatening, but grounding. I didn't earn this seat today. I earned it over 25 years. Through work, through discipline, through barriers you don't even know exist. He let the silence sharpen. And yet you looked at me and saw someone out of place. The lead attendant's breathing broke. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, Elias replied, but I don't need your apology. He looked at her with steady eyes. I need your understanding. Passengers watched, stunned by the difference between punishment and principle. Suddenly, the radio crackled again. Mr. Grant, the supervisor called out, breathless. The board has joined the line. They want your immediate disposition. All heads turned to Elias. He didn't rush. He didn't posture. He simply returned to his seat in row 1A, sat down with deliberate calm, and picked up the phone the captain placed beside him. He lifted it to his ear. This is Grant, he said. Patch me through. The cabin held its breath, because whatever he was about to say next wouldn't just shape the fate of this flight. It would decide the future of the airline. The phone clicked softly as the connection stabilized, and a faint chorus of voices filtered through, layered, crisp, unmistakably corporate. Not customer service, not operations, the board. Even passengers who couldn't hear the words felt the shift. Power doesn't need volume to be recognized. It announces itself through posture, breath, tension. Elias sat in row 1A, back straight, eyes forward, one hand resting lightly on the armrest as if the aircraft itself were listening. This is Director Hale, a voice crackled. Mr. Grant, we are aware of an incident on Flight 207. Please confirm. Do you require immediate intervention? Elias spoke with the calm precision of someone accustomed to steering empires. No, he said. I have it under control. What I require is acknowledgement. A pause. Then another board member. Acknowledgement of what, sir? Elias' gaze lifted to the attendants, seated rigidly in the jump seats. The systemic failure that occurred today, he said. and the cultural gap that allowed it. The board murmured, muffled but tense. He continued, I am issuing a Level 3 conduct review, effective immediately. Gasps flickered through the cabin. The captain froze mid-step. The supervisor's pen dropped silently against his clipboard. A Level 3 review wasn't routine. It was historic. The board's chair cleared his throat. Mr. Grant, that level of review affects all crew, all gate staff, and the station manager. It freezes promotions for the entire region. Are you certain you want to escalate to that degree? Elias' answer was almost gentle. It's not a matter of what I want. It's a matter of what happened. Another voice, deeper, edged with apprehension. Very well, the board will comply, but we request preliminary statements for documentation. Elias exhaled slowly. I'll give them now. The cabin leaned in, unknowingly becoming part of the transcript of an airline-wide reckoning. He spoke clearly, deliberately. Passenger discrimination, motivated by assumption, he began. Failure to verify credentials. Compounded bias from multiple crew members. Negligent escalation. Disrespectful communication. Procedural override without cause. Each phrase landed like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Precise, undeniable, unemotional. The attendants flinched at every listed failure, as though each one peeled away another layer of the protection they once believed their uniforms provided. The board member asked, Do you recommend termination? The room went still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. No, Elias said. The attendants gasped relief sharp enough to hurt. He continued, Termination closes doors. Education opens them. Passengers exchanged glances, surprised, impressed, unsure. But I do recommend full suspension, Elias added. Retraining, probation, and a formal record of bias placed in their files. Their relief fractured into something more complicated, a blend of gratitude and reckoning. The board replied, That will be executed. Elias shifted in his seat. One more thing, he said. The cockpit door opened slightly, and the captain instinctively paused, sensing something important was unfolding. I want a mandatory anti-bias curriculum developed and integrated into all crew training. Every role, every rank. The board hesitated. That is a significant restructuring, one member warned. Then consider this incident the justification, Elias said softly. A silence followed, long, waited, inevitable. Finally, approved. Elias ended the call. He placed the phone gently onto the tray table, the click of plastic sounding louder than the engines beneath them. The supervisor stepped forward, voice trembling. Mr. Grant, would you like us to inform the crew now? Elias stood, expression calm but unyielding. No, he said. I'll do it. He walked toward the attendants, each step steady, as if the ground beneath him had already accepted what came next. The lead attendant couldn't look at him. Her hands twisted in her lap. The younger one stared forward, eyes wide, absorbing every consequence of a moment she wished she could rewrite. Elias stopped in front of them. You'll remain employed, he said quietly. But your roles, your understanding, and your responsibilities begin again from zero. Their breath hitched. He continued, voice almost softer now. I'm not punishing you. I'm resetting you. The lead attendant whispered. Why? After everything we did, why show us mercy? Elias held her gaze for the first time with something resembling warmth. Because dignity is measured not by how we're treated, he said, but by how we respond. Her tears fell freely then, not from fear but from something deeper, accountability. Behind them, passengers nodded subtly, recognizing the difference between retaliation and leadership. The supervisor cleared his throat. Mr. Grant, the board has cleared the aircraft. We're ready for departure. Elias inclined his head. Then let's take off. The cabin lights shifted to a gentle glow. The new crew secured the cabin with silent efficiency, and the old crew, humbled, shaken, remade, watched their own future stretch out in front of them like a runway reflecting moonlight. Takeoff would begin soon. But ascent had already started. The engines rose to a low, resonant growl, that deep, physical vibration you don't just hear, but feel behind the ribs. Passengers settled. Seatbelts clicked. The new crew took their positions with immaculate precision, but it wasn't the ascent they were focused on. It was the man in row 1A, the one who had turned an aircraft into a classroom, a boardroom, and a mirror all at once. The captain's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be departing shortly. We appreciate your patience." His tone carried a quiet reverence, as if signaling to the cabin that something more profound than a flight delay had unfolded here. The attendants seated in the jump seats inhaled shakily, bracing for the moment the aircraft would tilt upward, but the real tilt had already happened inside them. Elias rested a hand lightly on the armrest, eyes calm. No anger, no triumph, no lingering sting, just clarity. The aircraft began its pushback. Lights along the aisle dimmed. Phone screens flickered off. The world outside shifted into motion. As the plane taxied, the supervisor approached one last time. "Mr. Grant," he said softly, "I hope you know, no one will forget what you did today." Elias tilted his head slightly. "That's the point," he said. "They shouldn't." The supervisor nodded, swallowing hard. There was admiration there, the kind that grows in the shadow of integrity, not intimidation. He stepped away. The engines roared in full as the plane reached the runway. For a moment, the entire cabin felt suspended, that fragile stillness before acceleration. The captain pushed the throttles, and the aircraft surged forward. Wind screamed past the windows. The cabin pressed back into their seats. Lights blurred. The nose lifted. And with it, something else rose, a collective understanding that dignity didn't announce itself. It asserted itself. At 30,000 feet, the cabin leveled out. The seatbelt sign pinged softly, a delicate chime that felt almost ceremonial after everything that had unfolded. The replacement crew moved discreetly through the aisles, offering water, checking on passengers, restoring normalcy with the quiet grace of people who understood they were part of a moment bigger than their shift. Meanwhile, the original attendants remained seated, faces still, hands folded, eyes lowered but awake in a way they hadn't been earlier. Awareness had carved new lines into them. Elias finally stood. A hush fell across the first-class cabin, not because he asked for it, but because his presence had become a signal. He stepped toward the attendants. "You'll rebuild," he said simply. The lead attendant blinked up. "Sir, do you really think we can?" Elias nodded once. "If you choose to." The young attendant swallowed, voice trembling. "We will, I promise." Elias looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her with a steadiness that could anchor mountains. "Then today wasn't your downfall," he said. "It was your beginning." The captain passed by on his way to the lavatory, pausing briefly. "Mr. Grant," he said with an earnestness that carried years of command, "what you did, I've never seen anything like it." Elias gave a quiet, almost imperceptible smile. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just refused to shrink." The captain absorbed that, nodding slowly before stepping away. A woman in row 2 leaned forward. "Sir, I just want to say thank you." "For what?" Elias asked gently. "For showing what authority looks like when it's anchored by character," she replied. Her husband added softly, "Most people with power raise their voices. You lowered the room." Elias didn't respond, but the acknowledgement reached him not as praise but as confirmation. Later in the flight, turbulence hit light, harmless, but enough to stir tension. The new crew moved efficiently, reassuring passengers with steady voices. The old crew watched them absorbing, learning. One of them murmured, "I want to be that composed, someday." Elias, hearing it, spoke without looking back. "Then, learn from what humbled you, not what punished you." Silence held for a moment, humbled, reflective. As the plane began its descent hours later, the world outside the window glowed in streaks of orange and violet. The sky held that soft, late evening hue where day doesn't surrender to night, it merges into it. The captain addressed the cabin once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Thank you for choosing our airline." But beneath the scripted announcement lay something else. An unspoken acknowledgement that this day would enter internal reports, training manuals, and quiet conversations long after the wheels touched down. The aircraft lowered through cloud layers, each one brushing past like soft veils. Elias sat still, watching the ground rise to meet them. Not satisfied, not righteous, simply resolved. The plane touched down with a muted thud. As the cabin erupted in the usual rustle of buckles and bags, the lead attendant approached him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Grant, I won't waste this." Elias met her eyes. "Good," he said, "because dignity isn't a lesson, it's a practice." She nodded, tears brimming but steady. Elias stood, adjusting his jacket, the fabric falling with the deliberate weight of a man who didn't need applause to validate principle. He stepped into the aisle. Passengers parted for him without being asked. Not out of fear, out of respect. He walked toward the exit, calm, centered, unhurried. A man behind him murmured to his wife. He didn't punish them, he changed them. She replied softly, "No," he reminded them. As Elias stepped off the aircraft into the jet bridge's muted light, the final truth settled into the cabin like a signature written in air. Justice doesn't shout, it simply stands up and the world rearranges around it.